Welcome to Pursue Wisdom, the teaching podcast of Bethlehem Church in Austin, Minnesota. I'm Pastor Paul Steele, and we are in a sermon series called Asking for a Friend. We all have questions when it comes to God, the Bible, what it means to follow Jesus. And we would like some answers to those questions to give us confidence in what we believe. And so my prayer is that in this sermon series, you will be encouraged, that you will be given some reasons on why you can know that following Jesus is the absolute best way to live. Let's get into the sermon.
All righty. Sermon number 15, the final sermon in this series. From the beginning, this was the sermon I wanted to end this series with. So we're going to be talking about I have doubt. Can I still be a Christian? So our sermon text is James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. I don't know if you know this, but Abraham Lincoln's coffin has been examined twice. The first occasion came in 1887, 22 long years after his assassination. And why did they open up the coffin? Well, it wasn't to see if he was killed by a bullet fired by John Wilkes Booth. Rather, it was because there was a rumor. There was a rumor that his coffin was empty. That he didn't really die, that there was nothing in that coffin. And so after a while, these rumors, they're like, okay, let's put these rumors to rest. So they dug up the coffin, opened it up, and thought, yep, there's the body right there. But here's the thing. It happened a second time. 14 years later, these same rumors started to happen again. Like, the coffin's empty. Abraham Lincoln's really not there. And so there was a movement, again, to dig up the coffin, open it up, just to check. But Lincoln's son, Robert, had protested against this. Like, no, we already did this once. We don't need to do it again. But they did. They dug it up. They opened it up. And what did they find? They found Lincoln's body right there. And since then, they have put the coffin into a crypt in Springfield, Illinois. So here what we see is that when we have questions and we don't get those questions answered, they kind of can take on a life of their own. They can raise doubts. They can raise other questions. Well, maybe Abraham Lincoln really didn't die. Maybe he's alive and well somewhere else. Maybe, how do we know? I never saw that there was a body in the tomb. We need to check it out. So questions left unanswered can often lead to these times of uncertainty and doubt. And that's what we've been doing here so far this spring. We've been looking at questions because we all have them. And when we don't take time to address them, when we don't take time to answer them, well, we can start to dwell on them and we can start to think, well, maybe there isn't an answer. Maybe this whole thing isn't what I thought it was. So we let doubt and uncertainty creep in. But even sometimes when we get an answer to the question, we can think, well, I don't know if I really buy that. Because let's face it, there's a lot of things within Christianity, even though we know the answer, it's a little hard to understand. right? I think a big one is like the Trinity. What's that? We've talked about that. We can see where the Bible teaches it, but there can still be like, well, I don't quite understand how all that works, how God is one being, yet three persons. Explain that to me. And so we let doubt and uncertainty kind of creep in, even when there is this, even when we do have answers. And we think, man, I doubt. I'm uncertain. And we read a passage like Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, which says, now faith is being sure, right? Faith is being sure of what we hope for and convinced of what we do not see. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and convinced of what we do not see. And we think to ourselves, well, I'm not sure. I have questions. Therefore, I must not have faith. Must not have faith. And if I don't have faith, I don't really follow Jesus. And so we can convince ourselves that if we doubt, then we can't really follow Jesus. We're not really a Christian. And so I think first, what we need to do is we have to define our terms. So when we come and we talk about having faith, often our definition of faith is like the second definition found in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, which says, faith is firm belief in something for which there is no proof. Faith is firm belief in something for which there is no proof. And so we think, man, for me to have faith, I have to have this firm, unshakable belief. Even if there isn't any proof or evidence to support it, I have to believe it. Now, in the New Testament, the common Greek word that is used for faith, or that's translated faith in our English translations, is pistis. And pistis means faith, faithfulness, belief, trust. But here's the key. If we're going to understand what the Bible means, what biblical faith is, here's the key. With an implication, so it's a trust with an implication that actions are based on that trust. So biblical faith isn't just about having this belief, but it's more about having this trust, which leads to action, which leads to obedience. The key is trust that leads to obedience and faithfulness. And this corresponds nicely, actually, to the first definition of faith found in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, which is this: allegiance to duty or a person, loyalty, fidelity to one's promise, a sincerity of intention acted in good faith. So faith is about our trust, it's about our allegiance, it's about how we live. And even if we go back to that definition of faith found in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, faith is the assurance, being sure. And we're sure because trusting in God, we're trusting in God so much that we are assured that he keeps his promises, that his promises are true. So our assurance isn't based on having no evidence, it's based on the character of God, on who he is. That's where our faith comes from. So what does it mean to have doubt? What does it mean to have doubt? So we understand doubt as being uncertain or having a hard time accepting something as being untrue. The Greek word translated doubt is diakarino, which here's that definition: to make a distinction, to judge, to waver. So it has less to do with uncertainty. So when the Bible is talking about doubt, it has less to do with uncertainty or to have questions, and it has a lot to do with making a distinction or a judgment about God and find him lacking. So that's when we doubt. We make this distinction, we make this judgment about God, and we're like, God isn't enough. God can't be trusted to keep his promises. And so that's what doubt is. We're not trusting in God's character. We're not trusting in who God is. And that, of course, that fits perfectly with Merriam-Webster's definition, first definition of doubt, to call into question the truth. A lack of confidence in, distrust. So when we doubt, it's less about our questions and more about our confidence in who God is. Who is God? Now, the famous passage about faith and doubt is James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting. For the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all his ways. I struggled with this passage for so long. It brought every time I read it, and it just brought all this shame to me, because here I was, and I'd pray, and all of a sudden, right, these questions creep into your mind. Is God hearing me? Am I asking the right thing? Does God care about this? And then I'm like, well, no wonder God's not answering my prayer, because I have all this doubt. I have all this uncertainty. And so when that's your feeling, right, like I can't pray and I can't be 100% certain, so I'm just not going to pray, right? So I think a lot of us can fall into this trap. Like, I have these questions, I have these uncertainties, that means I don't have faith. I'm not trusting God, so I'm just not going to pray anyway. It won't make a difference because I don't have that type of faith. And then I was doing a Bible study with the high school students in Stronghurst, Illinois. I'm youth pastor, right? So I'm doing a Bible study through the book of James. And I'm studying. I had come to this passage, and I realized for the first time what this is all about, what James is talking about. Rather than seeing doubt and faith as opposite sides of the same intellectual coin, because that's how we see it, like you have faith, this strong conviction and belief on one side, and doubt on the other. And it has so much to do with our intellect. I began to understand that when James is talking here about faith and doubt, we need to see it through the lens of relationship. We need to see it through the lens of a relationship. And so I wrote a parable to explain what it means to have faith without doubting. So what does it mean to have faith without doubting? Well, I think it can be explained this way, that there are two men who married their high school sweethearts. Now, the first man, he had a wandering eye. It wasn't long into that marriage when troubles and trials began to happen, and he was able to spot a better situation. But as he moved on, that relationship had troubles and trials as well, and he left again, finding what he thought was a better situation, and he went from relationship to relationship without really, truly finding what he was looking for. And when it came time for him to face his death, he died terrified and alone. The second man made a vow to himself and to God that he would always love his high school sweetheart. And so when troubles and trials came up into their marriage, he took time to talk to her and work things out, and their love continued to strengthen and to grow. It wasn't long before there were children. And again, the man made a vow to himself and to God that he was always going to love his children. And so when trials and troubles began to enter into the family, he took time to talk with his children and to teach them right from wrong. And as it came time for him to face his death, he was surrounded by people he loved, and he died happy and loved. You see, within the first man, he had doubt. And that doubt came from his lack of commitment. And so when trouble and trials came, it was easy for him to doubt his love for his wife, her love for him, her faithfulness, her goodness, their future together. All these doubts, all these uncertainties came in because of that lack of commitment, that lack of trust. But for the second man, right, he made that commitment. He made this vow. And when trials and tribulations came, he was able to be confident about his love for her love for him, her faithfulness, his faithfulness to her, their commitment, their future together. That confidence came, right, from his vow, from his commitment. Like this, I'm going to stick this out. And because of his commitment, he was able to see her differently. He was able to be confident about her character. And that's the whole key when we're talking about faith and doubt. We want to have a commitment to God, a loyalty to God that helps us be confident about his character, about his love, about his commitment to us, about his goodness, about what he desires for us. And so we come to this passage in James, and James is saying, hey, if you lack wisdom, ask God for it and trust his character, that he is a generous God, that he loves you, that he wants what is best for you, and he is going to provide for your needs. Trust in God's character. Make that commitment to him. And as you grow in that relationship, you're going to become more confident about who God is, about his love, about his faithfulness, about his promises. You're going to have hope there. Because if you don't make that commitment, James says, this is what's going to happen. You're going to become double-minded. You're going to waver. You're going to be tossed back and forth. And you shouldn't expect, if you're not committed to God, if you haven't pledged your loyalty and allegiance to God, if your relationship with Him isn't growing, you shouldn't expect anything from Him. And those questions and those uncertainties, what's going to happen? They're going to take on a whole life of their own. You're going to doubt who God is and His love, and His generosity, and His mercy, and His forgiveness. You're going to doubt all of that. So doubting in the context of our relationship with God isn't about feelings of uncertainty, but it is a lack of a commitment to God, a loyalty to Him, having your allegiance to Him, and allowing yourself to have this relationship with Him that then strengthens your understanding of who He is, making you more confident about His goodness and His love. When we lack that commitment to God, we're not going to discover God. We're not going to experience God for who He truly is. And so we make that commitment. We make that vow. God, I'm going to follow You. I'm going to trust Jesus. I'm going to be guided by the Spirit. And our faith grows, our commitment grows, and we trust God more and more and more with our lives. We have to realize, because I think this is so crucial, when we just see faith and doubt as intellectual realities. And if we have any sort of question, if we have any sort of uncertainty, then we don't really have faith. The reality is that as we follow Jesus, we're going to have questions. There are things that we're not going to understand. And if we let those things get a hold of us and become the primary focus of our faith, then we're in trouble. Then we're in trouble. But if we realize, like, this is a natural part of what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to live a life of faith, then we can use them to grow. Theologian and writer Frederick Buechner wrote this: without somehow destroying me in the process, how could God reveal Himself in a way that would leave no room for doubt? If there's no room for doubt, there would be no room for me. Like, God is invisible. God is eternal. God is omnipresent and omniscient and all that. God is so much bigger than who we are. And as the Bible says, His ways are not our ways. We're not going to be able to fully comprehend who God is. And that was his whole point here. Like, if God could reveal Himself in His entirety in such a way that removes doubt from us, then we're not really us, because we can't comprehend who He is. And so there's always going to be room for uncertainty. There's always going to be room for questions, and that is okay. It's part of what it means to be human. What matters is, are we going to be committed to God or not? Are we going to be loyal to Him or are we not? A great example of this is found in the Psalms, right? So the Psalms of Lament. The most of the Psalms of lament are saying, God, where are you? Why are you hiding yourself from me? How long is this going to take? Where are you? It's these questions. It's these almost on the verge of doubting. God, come and show yourself to me. But how do all these Psalms of lament end? They all end with a commitment to follow God, to worship God. God, I'm going to worship you. I'm going to praise you regardless of what happens. That is the perfect example of what it means to have faith without doubting. Like, God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know where you are. I don't know when you're going to show up. But I know this. I'm going to praise you with my life. I'm going to give you everything that I have. I'm going to commit myself to you. That is what matters. What matters is not a life of absolute certainty, but a loyal commitment to God based on Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. So, do you have questions about God? Do you have questions about the Bible? Do you have questions about what it means to follow Jesus? Those questions and uncertainties aren't doubting, not within the biblical context anyway. They're rather a natural part of a growing faith. Don't be worried about your questions. Don't be worried about your uncertainty. We're going to have them. And I think a lot of times we can find answers, we can find guidance when we allow ourselves to ask those questions. What is needed is not certainty, but a solid commitment to God because of our trust in His character and His love and His goodness and His grace. Yes, you can doubt, you can have questions and be uncertain and still be a Christian. Yes, that is possible. You can have those doubts. Intellectually, you can have questions. You can be uncertain. That doesn't disqualify you from following Jesus. What matters is that you are committed to God, that you have a faith in God, that your allegiance, your loyalty is to God. That is what matters. Above all else, is being committed to God and following Jesus. So here is our big idea this morning. Here's our big idea this morning. What matters to God is not our questions, but our commitment. What matters to God is not our questions, it's our commitment. Are we committed to following Jesus? Are we committed to God? No matter what may happen to us, no matter what uncertainty we have, no matter what questions we might come up with, are we committed to God? That is the most important thing. When we are certain about God's character and love, when we're certain about God and His character and His love, our uncertainty and our questions fade into a life of faith. They don't become so important. We may have them, but they are not the most important thing about our life of faith. They fade into the background because we know who God is, we know His promises, we know where our hope lies. So here's our challenge this week. Write down any questions, any uncertainties you have, and give them to me. And we can do this whole thing over again. I think it's crucial for us to understand, to live a life of faith, we're going to have questions, we're going to have uncertainties, and that's okay. Let's see what the Bible says. Are there good, solid answers there that are going to help us? I think when we allow that type of discussion to happen, that that is healthy, and it helps for a good, healthy faith to grow and to prosper. So let's ask those questions. If you have any questions you have, write them down, give them to me, and we'll try to answer them. We might not be able to, but I'm sure we can find some guidance in the Bible. So what matters? What matters is a loyal commitment to Jesus that helps us follow him wherever he leads. Can we have doubt and be a Christian? Yes. Because what matters is our commitment, our loyalty to Jesus that leads us to God.
We don't have to worry about the questions that we may have. God's not afraid of them. There are good answers to the questions that we have. And I am confident that as we seek these answers, God is going to use the whole process to strengthen our faith and make us into the people that he created us to be. Keep on asking those questions and keep on looking to God.